No, it's a kind of a privilege. I'm thankful to Professor Pavarala, Professor Malik, and Sanjay sir for kind of having me here, because I look at this as a kind of once in a lifetime kind of an opportunity. So it's kind of, thank you so much for remembering me, and it's kind of pleasure being here. I quote Sanjay sir that in 2017 December, when we did ICA Asia Regional, he said, I have no power, no point, so I don't want PowerPoint. And I thought that since being probably a next generation of communication teachers, I'll need a PowerPoint to kind of keep me on track, because as a teacher, I have a tendency to kind of go all over the place. So I thought at least I'll kind of remain structured. I come predominantly from a social science training, because my guide had been American trained anthropologist. So, and he was my master's guide and my PhD guide, Dr. Binod Agrawal. Whom I owe kind of a lot of my research training. So I look for data, because without data I feel that how do I conclude? I can't kind of make sense. Also, it's very interesting, because when first time media education as an area of research came to me, because Sanjay sir was doing a project for EMIC, and it was first time that I spoke to him on phone, and I was supposed to kind of collect data in Mumbai, which eventually I could not do, but kind of that is a kind of an association that kind of grew longer. So we have a media educators group on WhatsApp. Some of the professors here are there. What happened a few days back, as you see on 22nd of March, there's this big kind of argument and discourse with reference to what are we doing as media teachers and what is happening with media. So I have kind of taken 4 quotes, because I look at that as a kind of a starting point to what I want to talk about. And they come from all over the country in that sense. So I've just taken randomly 4 people. Professor Das is from Jamia Millia Islamia, as some of you might be aware. And his kind of worry is quite evident, as you see, in terms of how journalism is kind of becoming just another ism. So that's kind of one. There's a Professor Sanjay Ranade, who is from University of Mumbai. Like, he's a kind of friend and a colleague of mine in the same city. And he's an ex-journalist turned into academician. And he is kind of worried about this whole business of democracy that we were talking about in the previous session, and we all are kind of more and more concerned, worried, and tensed about what is happening to us as citizens of this country. I think some of you might be aware of Professor here, because he's from Chennai. And there was this whole exercise about private and public media schools, because most of us, I suppose, are part of public media education institutions. There's a kind of a widening gap between what is happening in private institutes and what is happening in public. And he has kind of very clearly talked about how there's a dip slumber and nothing is happening, which is kind of, I'm not too sure if that is the case, but he felt that. And the last one, in terms of a kind of a teaching fraternity, Professor Dasgupta from Calcutta, who was also kind of long time senior faculty, I think he was Vice Chancellor also. He is also kind of worried about the credibility crisis, as you see, because as I said, lot of us, either probably we are growing older, that's the reason that we become a little more cynical, I feel, because I feel research and teaching makes you a little more, instead of curious, more cynical. So for everything we kind of start becoming worried. And then I have a kind of a senior batchmate of mine who is an editor with Divya Bhaskar, and there was this big controversy about Amit Shah's granddaughter and removing the cap. And they printed a kind of a long top front page on that. And he is an editor of a newspaper, and he kind of talked about, as a media practitioner who has nothing to do with teaching, but he is kind of talking about the kind of one-side reporting in journalism. And he is a kind of an editor, but he is saying journalists are losing credibility. Why am I using this as a kind of a premise is because, and some of things I think we all are kind of voicing it in some other language or the other, with reference to even political economy also we were talking about, by saying that what are we trying to make as media teachers or media educators? Are we kind of trying to make machine parts who will just go and shoot and come back and deliver? or are we kind to make change agents in our society? Also, this whole business of are we kind of talking about processes or are we talking about products? Because the degrees are becoming kind of centric. Like last week I got this one girl who came to me who wants admission next year, and she was working a 45,000 rupees job where the company has closed down now, and she's not getting that kind of a job because she was a graduate and started working, and therefore now her mother is insisting that she should do postgraduate. So now she's coming to do a postgraduate. So now why is she coming to do a postgraduate? Because there's no other job of 45,000. So that's kind of another issue that is kind of according to me. What last concern Padmaja ma'am said is, are we all interested? Because that's something that has started kind of worrying me now. By saying sometimes I feel that we are also kind of becoming part of, we're becoming screws of the machine in that sense by saying that we need to kind of do things, so we are doing it. What are we expecting teachers to do? Because I was talking to Usha ma'am and she said, I'm not going to teach next year. And I said, oh, teachers are becoming rare commodities, because like I'm in Bombay and I have this whole bundle of media practitioners whom I orient to come to classroom. And I have succeeded with about 25 of them on the ground that if you don't come to the class, you'll not get juniors. So some of them agree. And I'm in public university, so the honorariums are really kind of sad. But the whole challenge is to say a lot of these practitioners, I'm kind of right now also mentoring one of them who is so reluctant to come to the class. So he said, but I don't know how to teach, and I left the classroom long back. I said, yeah, but I'm not expecting you to teach. You come and talk about what you are doing, so that will kind of make sense. So that's kind of one thing that I have struggled hard, and I'm still struggling hard. And what exactly is the kind of an outcome of media education? Because are we kind of trying to make sensitive, curious human beings, or we are creating khali human resources for the industry? Because that's kind of some concern that we have. My question is that are we ready for the change? Now my concern and question as a kind of a media teacher and a researcher is that I feel that nothing has changed, because we still eat and we still pray and we still kind of hopefully love. I'm not too sure, because increasingly a lot of my old students come back and I see the narratives about making babies becoming more and more difficult. So that's kind of another thing that is happening probably, that reproductive cycle clinics are kind of flooded with IVFs and all sorts of things, because husband and wife don't have time to be together. So probably that has changed, but according to me nothing has changed, because we still kind of do things. The only thing that according to me what has changed is that the way we do things have changed. So some of the things that we do, the way we do has changed. But do we realize that we need to change? I personally feel yes, we realize that what we did and what we do, there has to be some amount of change. But what, according to me, what the challenge is that what do we do is to kind of sustain the change that we do. And that's where like I came across this very interesting blogger where I'm borrowing from her, and I'm kind of giving her a credit in terms of Dara Monifa. She is a kind of, she claims herself as a homegrown new media journalist, poet, artist and educator from Virginia Island. And if you go on her blog, then it's very interesting, because then here is she, like, who's not been media educated, okay? She's not, doesn't have a formal degree in media or communication, but she's doing what probably a lot of us would do eventually if we are trained and we have trained. So coming back to what I plan to talk and talk within my time frame is, and the context that I'm trying to use, because according to me, we are not left with anything called journalism education as far as India is concerned, because we are increasingly talking about communication education and media education to an extent in that sense. And the media that we're talking about is kind of all sorts of media, and as Sir pointed out, you have a performing literary and fine arts also, which is kind of around your department, which is, according to me, it's kind of fascinating, because we don't have that privilege at my university. What I discovered in 2009 when I was kind of talking about this in front of Keval Kumar, Professor Keval Kumar, which most of you would be knowing, is that I looked at media education as a media education of how we teach students to kind of work in media. And a lot of his work that he has done is about how to kind of read media, or rather we call about critical media education in that sense of the term. So, but I'm kind of talking about the previous one. I'm not talking about the next one in the context that I'm using. I already said that there are a lot of dichotomies. Most of us are aware about them, so there's no point kind of going further. And I think Sanjay sir also have written about it, and a lot of other researchers have talked about it. And this continuous struggle about exclusion and inclusion, and continuous struggle about participant and spectator. Also, this whole challenge of communication education as a communication, or we talk about journalism and media education, because especially in the context of new media, we are all, as was pointed out, unpaid laborers of Google and Facebook, and also we are all kind of journalists and communicators. When we kind of looked at it in terms of a teaching and learning context, then as we all are aware, and we have a kind of issues in terms of what can be included and what cannot be, and what are the specialization and how do we deal with it. And now media is becoming convergent, so the students are supposed to work in cross media platforms, and how do we as teachers kind of train them. So that those are the kind of standard challenges. What is critical according to me is that media education has implications on representation and development of this country, which is according to me is more critical, unlike a lot of other disciplines, because I usually say that one bad doctor will kill one patient, but one bad media student or one bad media professional can actually spoil the psyche of the entire society. And we are seeing classic examples where nation wants to know and all sorts of other people want to know. So where do we go from there is a kind of a challenge. Just to kind of quickly talk about the stakeholders. In my understanding, as far as we are concerned, and I think Sanjay sir can correct me, is that there is no regulators and there are no state role as far as media and communication education is concerned. Actually, especially now, we have a far more number of private schools than the public institutions offering media programs. So, and obviously politicians also have now media schools and media houses. So that's kind of an added dimension in terms of how they can kind of use up the resources. I'll just kind of quickly point them up, because I'm sure that most of you are aware about them, in terms of how fast to change, what to include, what to remove, to an extent that what students want and what we want to give them as teachers. So these are the kind of standard challenges. Media industry have started now getting involved in media education, because they realize that they get a free labor at much cheaper rates. And in Nadu and a lot of them, I think, are classic examples where people are paid stipend out of their own fees, and students are working. But I don't think they are investing, according to me. I'm not too sure, but I'm not sure about private media industry schools. Because there the training is more in the context of what they want rather than what it should be. So that's a kind of a challenge. So that's kind of broadly that. I think I managed time. Thank you very much.